Welcome to your cup of counsel. On this episode, we are talking about jury service. And although your gut instinct might be to try to avoid jury service, we're huge fans, and we're going to talk about the ins and outs of what you can expect if you get served with a summons and why you should enthusiastically accept and say yes. Today, we're also drinking coffee from Cafe Sebastian, fabulous coffee shop up the street from our office in the financial district in San Francisco. So go there and get a coffee too. And please share this podcast with your friends, with anyone who you think might want to hear about jury service. And subscribe, follow us for more in the future. Thanks. All right, so jury trials are one of our favorite topics that you and I talk about all the time because we're legal nerds and we love our jobs and we do a lot of things in front of juries. But most non-lawyers and non-nerds are not as interested. And some people get jury summons and totally freak out because they don't want to be in front of a jury. They don't want to be a jury. They don't want to be a member of a jury. And they're worried about taking time away from their work and their families and what's their employer going to say and how much time is this going to take. And, for some employees, people who work in sales industries or are paid hourly, it can be a big burden on them. So what would you tell someone who was just served with a summons and is dreading the idea of going into jury service and about what they can expect and why they should do it or not?
So I actually talk about this all the time because pretty much all of my friends that get summons call me. I got a jury summons. I don't want to go. How do I get out of it? What do I have to say? I know there's certain things that you can say to get out of it. Mm-hmm. And I laugh and I say, okay, well, first of all, let's talk about why I think you shouldn't get out of it. And then we have a great conversation. And I think I flipped a couple people into being excited about jury service. So let's talk about it today. And hopefully our listeners will also walk away from the episode thinking, oh, maybe being on a jury isn't such a bad idea after all.
Yeah.
And I can get on my soapbox and literally talk for hours and hours about this and about how important it is to be a juror. So where should we start?
Well, why don't we just talk logistically what happens? You get served with a jury summons. What's the process for what you have to do? And, where do you go? How long do you expect to be out of work?
Yeah.
Logistics.
Okay, logistics. All right. So don't ignore your summons. Number one, you can get a bench warrant issued if you ignore your summons. Mm-hmm. Usually it doesn't happen on the first time. That's not to say don't show up on the first time, but it really depends on the judge. Some judges take it very serious and issue warrants. Some judges just, don't really care. So you never know who you're going to get. So show up when you get a summons. You get a summons, you have to call in like the Friday before, and there's a number on the summons and it'll tell you if your group is reporting. 8 times out of 10, you just call every day. And then after 3 days of calling in, you get dismissed. So you won't ever have to go in person. If you do make the phone call and your number comes up, then you have to report to the jury, like the general office, which is in the courthouse in the basement. Usually you go in, you have to bring your summons. It's got a barcode. You scan it showing that you showed up. Then you sit down in like a big area with all the rest of the jury pool. So it's usually like 75 to about 130 people that are pulled in. Everybody in that room is going to be for the same case. And so everyone that you're looking around and you're seeing that's in the room with you could potentially be co-jurors on a jury if you ultimately get picked. You'll watch a little video about what the civil justice system is and the jury process.
Or the judge will tell you. That's what just happened in my case. Yeah.
Yeah, the judge will come down.
Uh-huh.
So talk about that and what kind of the judge goes over.
It was a smaller county. It was in Napa County. So the civil courthouse is very small. And the judge came down and introduced himself out of his robes and gave a little spiel on the civil justice system and the jury system and how it works. And then we brought jurors up into the courtroom to do jury selection kind of one at a time or in groups and then hardships, obviously, which we can talk about. But yeah, so I think what we're both saying and what we're both explaining on the podcast probably will be a little bit different by county, maybe, depending on whether it's a large county or a small county. And also like between the civil and criminal courthouse. I know in Napa, they're two completely different courthouses, and you presumably would know right away if you were going to be on a civil or criminal case because you would be in the particular building that it was for. But it obviously that changes over depending on the county and the courthouse.
San Francisco's the same. So you either get a summons for McAllister, which means it's going to be a civil trial, or you get a summons for Bryant Street, which is the criminal courthouse. So you know right off the bat that it's going to be a criminal trial. We know. People that are getting the summons in the mail may not necessarily know that there's two different courthouses, one civil and one criminal.
Right.
So you show up, you sit kind of in this general room until your courtroom is ready for you. And then sometimes, as you mentioned, the whole pod will go up together, or sometimes they'll split it in half. They'll have 50 people go up and they start jury selection. And then if they don't pick a jury out of those 50 people, they'll send the second bunch up to the courtroom. And so what happens when you get to the courtroom? So you get to the courtroom, there will be what's called a mini opening. So the judge will introduce themselves to the panel and say, I'm going to be presiding. This is a car accident case, or this is a chemical spill. This is whatever the case is about. Each attorney will get up and do like a 2 to 5 minute overview of what they think the case is about. And then they launch into jury selection, which is questioning the prospective panel about potential bias topics for that specific case.
So they'll select a few people to go into the jury box, and then a lawyer will stand in front of those people. And if you're a member of the jury, you'll be sitting in the box and you'll have a lawyer asking you questions, and you have to answer in front of the entire room of people. And it can be a little bit off-putting. But the biggest thing that we always tell jurors and that everybody should know is just to be as brutally honest as you possibly can be. And it's a little strange because you're in a room full of strangers, but the way that you can be the best juror, I guess, in that situation is just to answer as honestly as possible, because everybody that walks into any space carries biases, right? We all have them based on our upbringing and the way that we've grown up and other things like socioeconomic status. And that's fine. But the question that the lawyers are trying to get from jurors is, are your biases about particular issues in that case so strong that you don't think you can put them to the side and make a fair decision based on the evidence that you review? Right. And so that's, I guess, the advice that we would have for jurors. If you end up getting a summons in the mail and you go through this whole process, just be as honest as you possibly can be. And
that's hard to do. Like, it's
super hard.
It's hard to really be authentically self-reflective.
Yep.
And say, I'm kind of leaning one way or the other, but it's really important that you are honest and that you tell the parties that. And that is one way in which you will get dismissed from the jury. And I'm not encouraging people to say anything that's dishonest to get out of jury service, but it is really important that you be straightforward and you be honest. And so one of the classic examples that I've used, I've seen, lots of lawyers do this same spiel during jury selection is, think about a jury trial like an apple pie or a pie eating contest. Okay. And if you're being asked if you can serve as a judge in a pie eating contest, and you know that the pies are going to be an apple pie and a sweet potato pie, and you don't like sweet potatoes, you should let them know, I'm always going to pick the apple pie because I don't like sweet potatoes. And so it doesn't matter how amazing the sweet potato pie is, I'm never going to pick that one. And so I have to come forward and tell you that in the beginning so that I'm not unfairly judging this pie competition.
Yep.
It's not that I'm a bad person. It's just this is not the right competition for me. I can do the cookies because I don't have any cookie bias. I love all cookies equally. And so we tell prospective jurors, that or something similar to that. Like, this is a car accident case. And maybe your mom was killed in a car accident. And so there's just a lot of emotion and feelings in this scenario that makes this not the right case for you. But if this was a bankruptcy proceeding or an IP patent litigation case down the hall, maybe that's a great case for you. So we just need to know, is there something about the facts in our case that make it so that you can't sit and be a fair and impartial judge of the facts and the circumstances?
So in the jury trial that I just did, it was a gender discrimination case. We were representing a police officer against the police department. And we represented a woman, and she was a female police officer, obviously. And we were going through jury selection, and one of the men in the front row looked at me as I was asking questions about various topics related to bias. And he said to me, I just don't believe that women can do hard jobs. I don't think that women should ever be a police officer. I don't think women should ever carry guns. I don't think women should. I used to work in construction, and I don't think women should have ever work in construction. And he had very strongly held beliefs about what women could and could not do. And I asked him, those sound like strongly held beliefs. Do you think you'd be able to put those aside? It doesn't sound like it. And he said, no, I absolutely can't. And he was taken off the jury for that reason, right? Because it would be very hard for him to put those views aside and fairly evaluate the claims of my client, saying that she wasn't being treated fairly as a woman in the workplace, right? So it's just an example of there are various, and there were questions related to police that we needed to ask in that case, right? Because some people have very strongly held beliefs about police officers. And so there's always issues like this in every case. And some people do feel really strongly about them.
Yeah. So the legal standard is entirely impartial. And you'll hear attorneys use that during jury selection. We're looking for a panel of jurors that can be entirely impartial. And we tell them everyone comes into the courtroom with bias, with life experience that makes you feel one way or the other. And what we are genuinely trying to do, and I know there's a lot of public distrust, and they think, oh, the attorneys are trying to stack the cards. They're trying to get all pro plaintiff, and the defense is trying to get all pro defense. I think the defense is probably trying to get all pro defense. But from our perspective, I can authentically say we are trying to get 12 entirely impartial, open-minded individuals that will listen to the witnesses, evaluate credibility, listen to the evidence, and come with an open mind to really try and get it right. Figure out what the dispute is and get it right.
Yeah. And I think, by and large, juries do get it right. I really believe in our system. So let's talk about that. Why is the jury system so important? Why is it so important that people actually do it and sit on the jury and say yes and do the things? And why, the jury system right now is under attack, as is the whole judicial arm of government. Give us your soapbox.
Okay.
Give us a soapbox talk.
So I tell all of my friends, you need to show up for jury service, and you need to not argue for hardship and not make up some bias when you hear the facts because you're trying to get dismissed, because it's important.
And let me just interrupt you, Andje, real quick. I also want to say judges can tell when you're trying to get out of jury service. So we're assuming that will work if people just make up lies and say that they're biased, but a lot of times judges will not actually let that person go for expressing those types of things that just seem made up or a little bit off the wall.
Yeah.
So I just want to say that that's not an automatic out. A lot of judges will be like, no, I'm sorry. I don't really believe what you're saying. I think you just don't want to do this. And that's not actually illegal. Like you said, it doesn't rise to the legal standard of being excused. But anyway.
Yes. And judges will make clear that they're calling your bluff in a very public setting in front of 75 other members of the community. And it can be quite uncomfortable to watch. Yeah. So agreed. Do not make up stories to try and get out for, apparent bias that you clearly are not selling very well. So there's hardship and then there's bias. So at the beginning of jury selection, you will be able to say if you have a true hardship. So if you're caring for an ill spouse, or if you have a newborn and you're the primary caretaker, those are actual reasons why you can't sit in a jury trial for 2 weeks. Nobody can fill your role. If you're just at work and you're working on a big project, but you have other coworkers, that's not a hardship. You should be able to come take 2 weeks out. Your employer should respect that, hopefully pay you. Really good employers will pay you for jury service. And it's important that thoughtful, intelligent people serve on juries, because oftentimes I see people no-show or argue hardship or try and feign bias to get off. And then we're left with the people that are really eager to be on juries, which tend to be the retirees that have time on their hands. But think about if you were in an accident and you couldn't work anymore and you're in the prime of your career, or you have a young family and you're talking about what life is like for you now or what damages you have, and you're arguing to a generation that maybe doesn't align or doesn't understand the value of a current dollar or the rent prices in San Francisco, et cetera, it's hard to be judged by people that really aren't truly your peers. And so it's really important that everybody show up for jury service across the board, so that we do get 12 diverse members from different age groups, different socioeconomic status, so that they can all be part of the conversation, which is what's happened in this case and how do we make it right.
Yeah, and when it functions and when you see it function, it's really kind of a magical thing, right? You're pulling people from your community that are random, that come into a room and come from completely different backgrounds usually, and wouldn't ever get together for coffee or discuss anything together or agree on anything necessarily, right? They're probably different political affiliations and they get together and they hear the exact same evidence and they all sit down and make a decision about that has a huge impact on somebody else's life, another member of their community. It's really an amazing thing. And yeah, just from like a high level sort of philosophical standpoint, we should do it because it's our duty. It's sort of like, they say obviously voting is another civic duty, right? It's an important part of our democracy and all of that. But jury duty is sort of similar, right? You're served with a summons, and this is the way that you participate in this system. And there's a lot of countries in the world that don't have juries, that don't have the organized system of civil justice that we have, and it's like we have to participate in it for it to keep working, right? Yeah. It's so important. And I can say from the employment law standpoint, a lot of my clients, a vast majority of my clients sign arbitration provisions when they start working. So an arbitration provision is a portion of an employment contract. Usually it's in an offer letter or those employment documents that you click away when you start at a job. And people agree to them because they don't usually know what they are. And they take away your right to a jury trial if there's any dispute that arises from your employment. And so I, as the lawyer, get a call from a client saying my employer sexually harassed me, or that's not a good example because we don't have to arbitrate those claims anymore. But let's say I blew the whistle on illegal conduct in the workplace and I want to sue my employer. And I look at their offer letter and I'm like, you agreed that we wouldn't do that before a jury trial. And talk about a jury of your peers taking that away. Arbitrators, and this isn't my own view, this is a statistically supported fact, but arbitrators are predominantly older, white, and male. That's like statistically known, right? And so when I do race discrimination cases or cases where people from different backgrounds would be very helpful to adjudicate and understand exactly what happened in a case, that's a huge piece that gets taken away. So I feel really strongly about it. I fight arbitration provisions anytime I can with a good faith basis in court. And I feel like if you have the right to a jury trial, you as a litigant should exercise that right, and you as a potential jury member should go and serve because it's just so important.
Yeah. And I will say, after trials, I've talked to people that have been on my jury, and I myself have actually been on a jury, and we can talk about that in a minute. It is a hugely rewarding experience. And I know that sounds really cheesy and people are gonna be like, yeah, right. It is. Because at the end of the day, it's exciting. You sit, you listen to witnesses, you decide who's credible, who's not credible. You get to watch the attorneys perform in court. You will see that the skill level of attorneys varies vastly. The judge, if you get a good judge, the judge can, be a big personality and kind of interject in different ways that keeps everything really lively. So the process itself can be really fun. And then when you get back into deliberation, speaking from my own experience, it is such an interesting, eye-opening experience for how everyone learns differently. Everyone sees and trusts people differently. So when you get back into the deliberation room, there's 12 of you, and you pick a foreperson that kind of leads the discussion, and then you go around the table. How's everyone feeling about this? What do you think about this witness? And some people will say, oh, that witness he was so great. He was so smart. He knew what he was talking about. And then someone else in the room that sat in the courtroom and heard the same testimony is like, he's a liar. He doesn't know what he's talking about. My cousin's in biotech and I know X, Y, and Z. And then they start bringing in their outside life experience. Mm-hmm. And then you'll start seeing people that have clear biases. So the trial that I was on was back when I was in college in Santa Barbara. It was 3 counts of armed robbery. And so this is just like a tiny tidbit on bias. There was an older woman on the panel. She was probably in her late 70s. And the defendant had a tattoo on his hand. So we sit down and we're just starting our discussion. And she says, just volunteers for the room. Did you see that he had a tattoo on his hand? He's clearly guilty. He's in a gang. And we're like, there was no gang testimony. There was no tattoo testimony. But this woman, from her life experience and the bias that she brought into the deliberation room, decided from day one, it was an 8-week trial, but day one, she saw the tattoo on the hand, assumed that he was in a gang, and assumed, therefore, that he's done something wrong, and we're here because he did this. And so she had convicted him on day one.
Wow.
So it's little things like that now as an attorney coming into the experience from counsel's table, you worry that there's going to be people in your jury that have those bias, that aren't open about that bias during the jury selection process. So they make it onto your jury and then they can tank the whole case.
Yeah.
And that's really, it's really sad. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
But it's also the reason that I think most, at least civil cases, settle, because there's so much risk. You don't know what 12 members of the community are going to think and do in any given scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. And jury deliberations can be really complicated and heated, right? Because for each question on the verdict form, if you're in state court, you only need 9 out of 12 jurors to agree to whatever the group is going to agree to. So, if there are outliers, that's okay. And you can move on to the next question and try and get consensus. But juries can be stuck on certain questions or if they've decided liability on giving damages, and jury deliberations can go on for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I totally agree with you. I think it's a really good experience from what I've heard from actual jurors.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what people can expect if they are called out to jury service from their employers. There's actually a bit of variety with this. Employers are not required in California to pay you. A lot of employers do, but they're particularly not required if you have if you're paid hourly. So that there's a distinction in the law between hourly and salary. And I think the last I checked this, they are required to pay you if you're salaried, but only if it's less than a week. Have you heard that?
No.
Yeah, there's some strange nuanced rule there, but a lot of employers will pay for you to do jury service. And if you have an employer that cannot pay and you can't fulfill your basic needs if you don't get paid for several weeks or however long the trial is, then that would be something to tell the judge, and maybe that could be a hardship possibly if you have extreme economic hardship from sitting on a jury. The other thing is, when you get a jury summons in the mail and you go to the courthouse, you don't actually know how long the trial is going to be. Right? Sometimes trials are 2 or 3 days. They're super short. Sometimes they're longer than that, but you'll learn that kind of in the beginning stages, and then you can decide how much of a hardship it'll be at that point.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, you can get picked for every case is important. Every case is important to the litigants involved. And so I want to make that very clear, because I also have heard from friends that come back and they're like, oh, it's this tiny little car accident and I don't want to it's going to be a week of my life and it's really not that big of a deal. And I tell them it is a big deal for the parties that are involved. They have not been able to resolve the case. That's why it's going all the way to trial, which means that there is a key conflict that exists either on the side of damages, how much the case is worth, or on who's responsible. Mm-hmm. And so they are there entrusting their lives, sometimes their livelihood, if it's a lot of money that's at stake. Maybe somebody can't go back to work, and this is the difference between their family, keeping their housing or not, if they win or lose this case. So every case is important to the litigants involved. But also, sometimes you get called in on a case that has huge societal impacts. Mm-hmm. Like there was just a big verdict out of Florida against Tesla for autopilot failures and misrepresentations.
Yep.
And it was 12 members of the community, in some small community in Florida, that get picked on a jury that then enter this verdict that tells Tesla, you can't make these misrepresentations. You need to change your conduct and behavior. Well, guess what? That's worldwide impact. And so that tiny jury got to make a decision that's now going to have this ripple effect across society. So you never know what kind of case you're going to get. It could be hugely exciting. Yeah. It can be slightly boring. It can have societal impacts, or it could just impact the litigants that are involved. But my call to action is say yes to the summons, show up with a positive attitude and an open mind, because you're going to make a decision. If you get picked, that matters to people.
Yep. Matters to the litigant, to the plaintiff, but also can have a deterrent effect on the defendant if there's bad conduct involved as well, right? Yeah. Because the defendant, the company, has listened to the juries, and the jury's rendering a verdict that has slapped them a little bit on the wrist, right, for whatever's happened. And that can be important for societal effect too.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about our coffee today.
Great.
What are we drinking? We're drinking coffee from Sebastian Cafe, or Cafe Sebastian. It's down the street from us.
Yeah.
It's down the street from Altar Law, where we work, and we walk there sometimes when we want to be fancy, because it's a lovely little local new coffee shop down the street. Coffee is delicious, and we love them.
Their
So,
whole atmosphere, their vibe, everything. It's a new gem in the Fide neighborhood that we are excited to have discovered.
yeah.
For
So,
sure.
Cafe Sebastian, if you're here,
Yeah.
we love you.
Yeah.
Thanks for fueling us with caffeine through our hardest legal moments.
Definitely. Yeah. And if you like the discussion today, like, follow, share, do all the things, and let us know what you want to hear about on future episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.